Good morning, Smarter News. We're going to take a quick trip around the world today and talk about a smattering of different stories. I like to call this your sampler, where we're able to take small bites of really big stories just so that we keep them on our radar and continue to watch them. And we have a few really big ones today. Obviously, we've been very focused on what's happening with the COVID-19 pandemic, and we have several reports we're working on. I want to make sure while we're paying close attention to that we don't lose focus on some other stories. And remember, everything's really interconnected. So even when we're looking at some big international stories, we have to remember that the pandemic is a factor. We're all under a lot of pressure, aren't we? Sometimes we forget that. And governments are under pressure too. And this has a factor in some of the decisions that we're making. So I want to take you first to what's happening in Afghanistan. We want to keep tabs on that because we're in the final weeks of the U.S. drawdown in America's longest war. And one of the things that we've talked about is the gains made by the Taliban. And what you should know is that the Taliban continue to make gains in Afghanistan. Last week, we looked at what was happening in Kandahar. This week, I want to show you a different city. It's a little bit south there. You can see Kabul is where the capital is for Afghanistan. But when we're looking at the southern part with the border in Pakistan, this is really important. These are really critical areas. I circled one of the big cities that we're watching that's under the threat of being taken over by the Taliban. Why does this matter? Think about it in terms of where you live. I live in the state of Texas. So let's say I'm hearing reports that the Taliban have made gains in Texas. That's significant. But if I heard that the Taliban are threatening to take over Dallas or Austin or San Antonio or Houston, that's a really big deal. Those are really big commerce hubs and obviously have a very big symbolic meaning as well. Let's just take a look at what the Taliban have done over the last several years. This is a map that was created by the Long War Journal, one of my favorite sources, and you can see that over the course of the last several years, the red area is where the Taliban are. We're going to watch that video again so you can see how much territory they're gaining. And even though there's negotiations still taking place to see what the future of Afghanistan looks like with the current Afghan government, there's really a question about whether or not the Taliban just completely take control of this country. I want to take you here. I'm going to take you to the good old-fashioned globe. Sometimes I can't show you the maps as well as I want on the computer screen. So here's Afghanistan, shares a border with Pakistan and Iran. But I also want to take you over to this area of the world. You can sort of see it right here, Israel and Lebanon, because we have news over here from overnight. And one of the things that we're seeing in Afghanistan are airstrikes from Afghans, Air Force, as well as the United States to try to counter the Taliban. Well, we also have airstrikes that happened between Israel and Lebanon overnight. Oftentimes when you hear Lebanon and you hear rocket strikes into Israel, you have to think about an Iranian-backed terrorist organization called Hezbollah. Israel and Lebanon have exchanged fire over the years. We're watching that because it's a rise in tension, and also because of what happened over the last week. This is a story that I didn't see until just recently. So one of the things that we watch is what's happening in important shipping channels around the world. And oftentimes the Iranians like to harass different cargo ships. Well, just recently, a drone, a small one, sometimes you think of the big ones, small ones, crashed into the bridge of a cargo ship. This happened just last week. And it led to the death of 2 people. First time we've seen this in years. This is important because that cargo ship is tied to an Israeli billionaire. And so we're sort of watching the different pieces of this puzzle, just sort of like tensions sort of ratcheting up just a little bit. And we have to remember Israel has a new government. So sometimes there's testing of a new government. Israel is a major ally of the United States in the Middle East. And so, again, we're just sort of watching these different pieces of these stories just to make sure that we don't lose sight on what potentially could become higher tensions or a bigger story in the future. Israel's been in the news a lot because they have been just started handing out 3rd doses of the COVID-19 vaccine to those over 60. And they're really the kind of a leading country in the world when it comes to vaccinations. A very small country, so it almost gives us a case study of how well the vaccines are working or what sort of obstacles communities may face and when it comes to getting high vaccination rates. The reason why I'm mentioning that is because the World Health Organization just came out yesterday. And although there's thinking about, well, what could that happen in the United States? The World Health Organization said they really would like it if 3rd doses aren't given out to people that already have COVID-19 vaccines, because they want to be able to provide vaccines to places in the world where there's very low vaccination rates. The president just talked about this recently, President Biden, and he said that the United States is a leader. Look at dozens of countries combined. We've actually given more doses, 110 million doses to 65 different countries. The United States is talking about continuing to do that. And the reason why that matters is that a lot of the story we're watching right now has to do with the Delta variant. And variants come up with quick spread. And so the quicker that you can snuff out the spread of COVID-19, the less likely you have these variants that then threaten different communities. We use the term Delta variants, but before we use these terms, we would tie the variants to the different parts of the world where they're believed to have originated, although it's tough to trace. This variant was first really identified and looked at in India. So this is why even faraway places matter to us here at home, and why vaccination rates to some health policy experts are the way to make sure that we don't continue to have this, these rolling variants that continue to threaten sort of our everyday life. And when I say threaten our everyday life, I'm not just talking about our health. I'm also talking about our overall wellness and the economy. By the way, we have a big jobs report tomorrow that's going to give us a read on the U.S. economy. And there's some question about whether or not we're sort of slowing down. So it's a big report just to be aware of. We'll have our new unemployment rate, and we'll get kind of a picture of what's happening with the U.S. economy. We get this the first Friday of every month. So that's just another reason to look forward to Friday. There's lots of reasons, but that's just one of them. By the way, still working, while we are talking about vaccinations, I do think that's important. Still working on really providing some perspective on natural immunity when it comes to COVID-19 and how that works into this big picture that we're talking about, the pandemic right now. All right, guys, that was a quick trip. We went a lot of different places. Where in the world would you go? If you could go anywhere, you don't have to worry about a vaccine pass or anything like that. Where would you go? It's kind of a tough question, right? I'm hoping to get home. I haven't been home to my home city since January of 2020. I haven't seen my parents since then. I'm sure some of you have gone through some of that as well. Just a lot of different reasons for that. So hopefully I can get that in over the next couple of weeks before school begins. I see a lot of people requesting Italy. Love that idea. Should we do a smarter trip? Maybe a little historical perspective along with a little wine tasting? I have a whole vision. We got to get through this breaking news period. All right, guys, have a great day. All of these stories, we have a bunch of these stories on our website on smarternews.com. Thank you so much for your support. I'll see you later.